Let's start off with the top story. At this hour, human rights activists are calling on the government to establish the whereabouts of people who have disappeared without a trace. The activists claim that some of the people listed as missing have been apprehended by the police, and they now want the truth concerning these disappearances. They spoke as they marked the International Day of the Disappeared here in Nairobi.
Mpoteza maisha na tukawa na evidence kwamba hao watu wamekufa wakazikwa na tunajua mahala wamezikwa, ama wengine ambao wamezikwa na vyombo vya dola. Hawa ndio tunasema waliokufa wakauawa na wameonekana, hao ndio wako katika extrajudicial killings. Lakini kuna wale ambao wamepotea wakatokomea na wajulikani walikokwenda, wajulikani waliko, lakini kuna ushahidi wa kuonyesha kulikuwa na msukumo wa kidola ama makundi yaliyojipanga kuwapoteza. Na hao basi ndio tunasema ndio wako katika enforced disappearances.
That we have to go back to a struggle that we thought was concluded over 20 years ago. We're going back to despotism, we're going back to the dictatorship, we're going back to killings and extrajudicial, extra-legal activities by the state itself. The state has no legitimacy. I mean, the government has no legitimacy to rule if it's going to behave like any other criminal. Because criminals are the ones who take away the lives of people without a due process.
Swala hili sio swala la Waislamu peke yake. Swala hili ni la Wakenya wote. Hatuwezi tukakubali chini ya vizingizio kwamba ni vita dhidi ya ugaidi, wananchi wa Kenya waanze kumalizwa moja kwa moja, familia kuachwa yatima, na ni jambo ambalo hatuwezi tukakubali. Mahakama zetu hapa tayari wamepitisha kwa kesi mbili kwamba renditions are unconstitutional. Sema unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional.
All right, our reporter Ian Wafula was following the protest and the march in the city center of Nairobi today, and now joins us on a phone. Ian, talk to us about why this day is so important in Kenya today. For the first time, the International Day of the Disappeared has been commemorated internationally for a few years now, but is just gaining traction this year here in Kenya. Why is that?
Thank you, Yvonne. One of the reasons that this particular day has been celebrated here in Kenya for the first time is that following the discussions I'm hearing among the human rights activists, they say that previously extrajudicial killings and disappearances of people were quite common during the regime of President Jomo Kenyatta back then, and the cases kind of reduced. But what is notably is that they say within the short time that the Jubilee government has come into power, these cases have become quite common, and that is why they took advantage of this particular day to try and educate the public and also bring to the attention of the government that here these cases are happening. We have very many people who are disappearing, their families are struggling, spending a lot of money trying to get to know where their loved ones are. We have even others who are actually stuck in countries such as South Sudan and Uganda. Remember that, Yvonne, they're not just looking at people who are disappearing, but also people who have been held by government in other countries, say for instance, we have 5 people who have been held back in South Sudan, and today they have been there for 92 days. They allegedly committed a crime and they were held back by the government of South Sudan. And so the human rights activists here are saying, why isn't the government intervening when it comes to also such cases? So those are some of the issues that are being followed here today, Yvonne.
All right, yes, and you talked about not just those in the war on terror, also there's the South Sudan 5, an issue that we have highlighted here on KTN News for some time. But what is interesting, Ian, and you've covered not just the protests today, but the stories of persons having disappeared. And there seems to be a common thread amongst those stories, amongst some young men and women having been apprehended by the police. This is on the war against terror?
Yes, a few common things emerge when it comes to the people who disappear. First and foremost, they are young, aged between 20 to the early 30s. You realize that these are youth. Majority of them are always unemployed. And another two striking things is that they're either Muslim or from the Somali community. So majority of the people are wondering why is it that we are having these cases of profiling because it has largely changed the perception of the Somali community who are living in Kenya. And remember that most of them have always searched for years that they have not been included in the country. In fact, if you travel to Mandera or Kenya and other countries, they say when you go back to Nairobi, say hi to the Kenyans. So the human rights activists are saying once we have such kind of disappearances and torturing of the people, it continues to instill fear among the Somali community and others who do not have faith in the government and do not feel comfortable with this particular country, rather. So those are some of the common characteristics. And what majorly happens is that the government on its end says whenever these people are picked, for instance, we are still not sure whether it is the government, but the human rights activists insist that these cases of disappearances, in fact, they have been linked to extrajudicial killings. What they are told is that we are taking it in for questioning, and they are always linked to terrorism. So the human rights activists here are saying that we should not use extrajudicial killings and, this taking advantage and people disappearing as a method of countering terrorism.
Right, Ian, you mentioned something about the reactions from government. Now, we saw a lot of human rights activists and also members of Kenya's opposition or the minority, if you like, present there. Was there any government presence at all?
In fact, that's a very good point, Yvonne. Notably, one of the things we want to establish by the end of this particular meeting, because once the march and protest happened at the CBD, all the members came here to the Pan-African Hotel where the meeting is currently ongoing. No government representation. So we want to establish whether, the government was invited and they did not turn up, or why particularly they did not invite the government. Yes, they're the same people who are complaining against the government apparently carrying out these extrajudicial killings and being behind these particular disappearances.
All right, thank you very much, Ian.